My son leaned across the dinner table and told me I was dead weight, that my medical bills were a waste, that my health was draining his money. What he didn't know was that the table, the wine, the house, and the logistics company he bragged about running were all legally mine. For 10 years, I let him believe I was just a retired old man living off a pension while I quietly owned everything. 24 hours after he humiliated me, he was shaking in the rain at an ATM with nothing left. And I was already 30,000 feet in the air, watching his empire collapse in silence. Before we go any further, I just want to say this: thank you for being here with me. Let me know you're here by commenting where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches. And a quick note before the story continues: some moments ahead are dramatized for storytelling and reflection. While certain details are fictional, the lesson behind them is absolutely real. The piece of paper hit the dinner table with a sharp slap that silenced the room. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right next to my plate of half-eaten meatloaf. I looked down. It was a medical invoice from Dr. Evans, my cardiologist. The total amount was $200. It was a routine checkup, the kind a man of 72 needs to ensure his heart keeps beating. I looked up to see my son Bradley standing over me. His face was flushed. His tie loosened the veins in his neck, bulging with a rage that seemed entirely disproportionate to the piece of paper between us. $200, Dad. Bradley hissed the words through clenched teeth. You went to Dr. Evans again. I told you specifically to go to the free clinic downtown. Do you have any idea how hard I work? Do you think money just grows on trees in the backyard? I picked up the invoice slowly. My hand didn't tremble. I had faced hostile takeovers in boardrooms that would make Bradley wet his pants, so a tantrum from my son didn't scare me. It disappointed me. I kept my voice calm. It was a necessary checkup, Bradley. My blood pressure has been fluctuating. Dr. Evans has my history. The free clinic has a 6-month waiting list. Excuses. Always excuses. Bradley slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. My grandson Leo, who was 10 years old and sitting across from me, didn't even look up from his expensive gaming tablet. He just snickered a small, ugly sound of amusement at his grandfather's humiliation. Beside him, my daughter-in-law Monica took a sip of her white wine. It was a Chardonnay that cost $40 a bottle. I knew, because I was the one who paid the credit card bill, it was charged too, even if they thought they were the ones paying it. Monica set her glass down and looked at me with eyes that were cold and calculating. She sighed, the sound of a martyr dealing with an unruly child. Bradley is right, Douglas. We have expenses, real expenses. We have a mortgage. We have Leo's private school tuition. We have car payments. We cannot keep subsidizing your luxury medical preferences. If you want to live under this roof, you need to understand your place. You are a dependent. That means you do what we say. I looked at Monica. I remembered the day I approved the funds for her engagement ring because Bradley didn't have enough credit. I remembered signing the check for the down payment on this house, funneling it through a shell company so they would think it was a bank bonus. I looked at the steak on Bradley's plate, a prime ribeye. That single steak cost more than $50 at the butcher. You are eating a steak that costs a quarter of this medical bill, I said, pointing at his plate. We are drinking wine that costs 20% of this bill. Are you telling me that my heart health is worth less than tonight's dinner? Bradley let out a harsh barking laugh. I earned this steak, Dad. I am the CEO of Bradley Logistics. I manage 200 employees. I work 14 hours a day. I deal with unions, I deal with supply chains, I deal with stress you couldn't imagine. I deserve to eat well. You sit around all day reading newspapers and walking in the park. You contribute nothing. You are a drain. A $200 drain today, maybe a $500 drain tomorrow. It stops now. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Bradley Logistics. He really believed it was his. He believed the title on his office door meant ownership. He had no idea that Bradley Logistics was a wholly owned subsidiary of the Douglas Trust. He didn't know that the 14-hour days he claimed to work were mostly spent playing golf and long lunches. Facts I knew because I received the weekly efficiency reports from the COO, who reported directly to me. Bradley was a figurehead, a puppet I had placed in the chair to give him a sense of purpose, to give him a legacy. I had pumped $10,000 a month into the company's operating budget just to cover his inflated salary. I felt a surge of anger rising in my chest, hot and dangerous. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull out my phone log into the master banking app and show him the balance of the trust. I wanted to show him that I could buy and sell him 1,000 times over. I wanted to tell him that the only reason he wasn't working a shift at a fast food joint was because I loved him enough to build a sandbox for him to play in. But I looked at Leo. My grandson was watching now, a smirk plastered on his face, mimicking his father's arrogance. "Grandpa is wasting Daddy's money again," Leo asked, his voice high and mocking. "Yes, Leo," Monica said, stroking the boy's hair. "Grandpa doesn't understand that money is hard to get. Grandpa thinks he's special." That broke something inside me. It wasn't the anger of the moment. It was the realization of a total failure. I had failed. I had raised a son who valued status over blood, and he was raising a son to be exactly the same. If I revealed myself now, if I showed them the money, they wouldn't respect me. They would just change their tactics. They would become sycophants, beggars, liars. They would love the wallet, not the man. I took a deep breath and pushed the anger down, locking it away in a cold, dark place in my mind. I needed to see how far this rot went. I needed to know if there was anything left to save. "So I am a burden," I said quietly. "Is that it?" "Yes, Dad," Bradley said, sitting back down and cutting another piece of his expensive steak. "You are a financial anchor, and starting next month, things are changing. Monica and I have discussed it. We are cutting your allowance. No more cash. If you need something, you ask Monica. If she approves it, she will buy it for you. No more independent spending. And definitely no more fancy doctors." I looked at Monica. She was smiling, a small, victorious curl of her lips. She enjoyed this. She enjoyed the power. "And my privacy?" I asked. "I am 72, not 7. You lost the right to privacy when you stopped being able to support yourself," Monica said breezily. "From now on, you bring receipts for everything, even a stick of gum." I looked down at my plate. The meatloaf suddenly looked like ash. I realized then that I wasn't sitting at a family dinner. I was sitting in a courtroom and I had just been sentenced. But the judge and jury didn't know that the defendant owned the courthouse. "Fine," I said. My voice was low, I understand. Bradley didn't even look up. "Good. Eat your meatloaf. It's getting cold, and we aren't wasting food either." I didn't eat. I sat there while they finished their meal, talking about a vacation to the Bahamas they were planning, discussing which 5-star resort had the best pool. They talked about spending $5,000 on a week of sun, mere minutes after screaming at me over $200 for a doctor. I watched them. I memorized every word, every gesture of dismissal. I was building a file in my head, and the verdict was getting closer. The next morning, the rain was hammering against the windows, a gray, relentless downpour that matched the mood in the house. I was in the kitchen making a pot of coffee when Bradley walked in. He was dressed in his Italian suit, the one I knew cost $1,200 because the charge had come through on the company card last month, listed as office supplies. He didn't say good morning. He walked straight to the key rack by the door. He grabbed the key fob to the Lexus LS 500. It was a beautiful car, silver smooth, powerful. It was the car I had purchased 3 years ago under the company fleet program, but I was the primary driver. It was my one indulgence, the one way I maintained my freedom. Bradley took the keys and dropped them into his pocket. "I need the car today, Dad," he said. pouring himself a coffee without offering me a cup. I frowned. You have your Range Rover. Monica has her BMW. Why do you need my car? It's not your car, Dad Bradley said, turning to face me. It's the company car. And since I am the CEO and you are, well, nothing, I am reassigning the asset. The Range Rover is in the shop for detailing. I need to impress a client today. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. It wasn't about the car. It was about mobility. It was about freedom. I have an appointment at the library today, Bradley. I volunteer there on Thursdays. How am I supposed to get there? Take the bus, Bradley said, blowing on his coffee. Or call an Uber. Oh, wait. You don't have access to the credit card for Uber anymore. Better take the bus. It's cheaper. The bus stop was 6 blocks away. It was pouring rain. My joints ached in the damp weather. He knew this. He knew that taking the bus would be physically painful for me. Bradley, it is raining. I am 72. You cannot just take the car. I can, and I did. Bradley snapped. Stop being so dramatic. A little rain won't kill you. You need to understand that resources are for the people who bring value to this family. You are consuming gas insurance and depreciation on a vehicle that should be used for business. It's a waste, just like the doctor. It stops today. He took a sip of his coffee and checked his watch. I'm leaving. Don't forget to turn off the lights when you leave a room. The electric bill was high last month. He walked out the door. I heard the engine of the Lexus purr to life. I heard him back out of the driveway and speed off. I stood in the kitchen, the silence of the house pressing in on me. I looked out the window at the empty driveway. He had taken my car. He had taken my financial independence. He had taken my dignity at the dinner table. Now he was taking my physical freedom. I went to the closet and put on my old raincoat. It was worn at the elbows. I put on my flat cap. I didn't call a taxi. I didn't call my lawyer yet. I needed to feel this. I needed to experience the full weight of what my son was doing to me. I walked out into the rain. The cold water hit my face instantly. The wind whipped through the thin fabric of my coat. I began to walk the 6 blocks to the bus stop. My left knee, which had been bothering me for years, throbbed with every step. Puddles soaked my shoes. A car splashed me as it drove by, soaking my pants. As I walked, I thought about the past. I thought about the day Bradley was born. I remembered holding him in the hospital, promising him the world. I remembered working 18-hour days on Wall Street, missing birthdays and school plays, sacrificing my time so that I could build a fortune that would ensure he never had to suffer the poverty I grew up in. I remembered setting up the trust. I remembered creating the company specifically for him because he had failed at 3 other jobs and I couldn't bear to see him feel like a failure. I had created a world where he could be the big man. I had stepped into the shadows to let his light shine. And how did he repay me? By pushing me into the dark completely, by stripping me of the basics. He thought he was teaching me a lesson about economy. He thought he was managing a nuisance. He didn't realize he was poking a sleeping bear. I reached the bus stop shivering. There was no shelter. I stood in the rain, waiting. A young woman with a stroller stood next to me. She looked tired. She looked poor. She looked at me with pity. "Nasty weather for a walk, sir," she said softly. "Yes," I said. My voice was steady despite the cold. A very cold day. The bus arrived. I fumbled in my pocket for the loose change I had saved. I climbed the steps, my knees screaming in protest. I sat in the back, the smell of wet wool and damp humanity filling my nose. I closed my eyes. The image of Bradley's smug face at the dinner table burned in my mind. The sound of Monica's laughter. The look of disdain from my grandson. They thought I was helpless. They thought I was trapped. I reached into the inner pocket of my wet raincoat. My fingers brushed against a small black phone. It wasn't the smartphone Bradley monitored. It was a satellite phone encrypted with a battery that lasted a week. It was my lifeline to my real life. I didn't make the call yet. I needed one more confirmation. I needed to know exactly how deep the rot went. I needed to know if this was just cruelty or if it was criminal. I got off the bus downtown. Instead of going to the library, I walked 2 blocks to a nondescript office building. I didn't go in the front. I went to the service entrance. I took the freight elevator to the 4th floor. The sign on the door said Sullivan and Partners, Archives. I knocked. The door opened. A man in his 50s wearing a sharp suit and glasses stood there. He looked at my wet coat, my soaked shoes, my dripping hat. He didn't look surprised. He looked furious on my behalf. Mr. Douglas Sullivan said, stepping back to let me in. "You shouldn't be walking in this weather." "Why didn't you call the car service?" "I needed the walk, Sullivan," I said, taking off my hat. "I needed to remind myself of why we are about to do what we are about to do." Sullivan nodded. He led me to a large table covered in documents. "I have the report you asked for, sir. It's worse than we thought." "Show me," I said. Sullivan opened a folder. He laid out bank statements, credit card reports, and internal memos from Bradley Logistics. "Your son isn't just cutting your allowance," Sullivan said, pointing to a highlighted figure. "He is drowning. He has a gambling debt, a big one, $500,000 to a syndicate operating out of a casino in Atlantic City." I stared at the number. 500,000. "He's been skimming from the company accounts to pay the interest," Sullivan continued. "But he can't cover the principal. That's why he's squeezing you. He's panicking." "And the house?" I asked. Sullivan pulled out another document. It was a draft of a sales listing. He's trying to sell it. He's been in contact with a realtor. He's trying to do a quiet sale. He told the realtor he has power of attorney over you due to dementia. He plans to sell the house, dump you in a state-run facility, and use the equity to pay off the gambling debt before the sharks come for his legs. I felt a coldness settle over me that had nothing to do with the rain. This wasn't just ungratefulness. This was betrayal. This was my son planning to discard me like trash to cover his own mistakes. He was going to declare me mentally incompetent. He was going to lock me away. He had crossed the line. He hadn't just bitten the hand that fed him. He was trying to cut it off. I looked at Sullivan. "Is the jet ready?" I asked. "Fueled and waiting at Teterboro," Sullivan said. "The crew is on standby, and the bank protocols. Everything is set up. We just need your biometric authorization." I nodded. I looked at the documents one last time. I saw my son's signature on the fraudulent listing agreement. I saw the lies. "Do it," I said. "But not yet. Let him have one more night. Let him think he has won. Tonight I will go back. I will play the part of the beaten old man. I will let him gloat. And tomorrow we pull the plug." Sullivan smiled a shark-like grin. "Tomorrow we empty the accounts." I left the office. I walked back out into the rain. But this time I didn't feel the cold. I felt the heat of the fire that was about to consume my son's world. I caught the bus back. I walked the 6 blocks home. When I entered the house soaking wet, Bradley was in the living room watching TV. He looked at me dripping on the rug. "You're wet," he observed, not moving from the couch. "It's raining," I said. "Well, don't drip on the hardwood. Monica just had it waxed. Go to your room and stay there. We have guests coming for dinner, and we don't want you embarrassing us with your old clothes." I looked at him. I looked at the son I had loved more than life itself. "I won't embarrass you, Bradley," I said softly. "I promise." I walked to my room. I packed a small bag. Just the essentials. My passport. My real wallet. A photo of my late wife. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited for the sun to rise. The storm outside was raging, but the storm inside this house was about to be much, much worse. My son wanted me to stop wasting money, fine. By this time tomorrow, he wouldn't have a penny left to waste. The digital clock on my bedside table read 2:13 in the morning. The red numbers burned in the darkness like accusing eyes. I hadn't slept. The humiliation of the previous day, the feeling of the rain soaking through my coat, and the image of my son's smug face as he took my car keys had kept my mind racing. The house was silent, or at least it should have been. But in the deep quiet of the suburbs, sound travels in strange ways. I heard a floorboard creak. It wasn't the settling of the house. It was the distinct, heavy footfall of a man pacing. I sat up. My joints popped, a reminder of the age my family despised so much. I slipped my feet into my slippers and moved toward the door. I didn't turn on a light. I knew the geography of this house better than anyone. I had designed the floor plan myself 20 years ago, ensuring the master suite, now occupied by Bradley and Monica, had the best view of the garden, while the smaller guest room, where I now resided, was tucked away near the kitchen. I opened my door a crack. A sliver of yellow light spilled from beneath the door of the study down the hall. The study used to be my sanctuary. It was where I read my market reports, where I smoked my cigars, where I planned the future of the Douglas Trust. Now it was Bradley's command center, a place I was forbidden to enter, lest I disturb his important work. I crept down the hallway. My heart wasn't racing from fear of being caught. It was racing with the cold anticipation of a hunter. I needed to know what my son was doing awake at this hour. The CEO of a logistics company might work late, but Bradley wasn't a worker. He was a pretender. As I neared the door, I heard his voice. It wasn't the booming, arrogant baritone he used at the dinner table to belittle me. It was a hushed, frantic whisper, the tone of a man watching water rise past his chin. I pressed my ear against the wood. "Listen to me, I told you I have it handled," Bradley hissed. "Stop calling the house line. If my wife picks up..." "No, I know what I owe. I know the date." There was a pause. I could hear the heavy intake of his breath. He was terrified. Sullivan was right. The gambling debt wasn't just a number on a spreadsheet. It was a noose around his neck. "I don't have the cash liquid right now," Bradley said, his voice trembling. "The company accounts are complicated. My father set up fail-safes years ago. I can't just wire $500,000 without triggering an audit." I smiled in the dark. At least he wasn't completely stupid. He knew the fences were there even if he didn't know I was the one holding the electric prod. "But I have a solution," Bradley continued, his voice dropping even lower. "I need 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks. I am liquidating the primary asset." "Yes, the house." I froze. The house. This house. The property was held by a shell corporation under the trust. Bradley lived here rent-free as a perk of his employment. He didn't own a single brick. How did he think he could sell it? "I have a realtor who isn't asking too many questions," Bradley said. I told him the title deed is in a safe deposit box, and we are processing a lost deed affidavit. I'm the executor of the estate. Well, technically not yet, but the old man is... Look, he's barely lucid. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. Barely lucid. This morning I had discussed the geopolitical implications of the new trade tariffs with Sullivan. I had completed the New York Times crossword in ink in 20 minutes. But to my son, I was a senile obstacle. "I am finalizing the power of attorney paperwork tomorrow," Bradley said. "I'm going to sign it for him. He shakes so much he can't even hold a pen, so a squiggle will look legitimate. Once I have that, I can transfer the title to my name and flip it to one of those cash-for-homes investors. We'll take a hit on the market value, but I can get you the 500 grand by the end of the month. Forgery. Fraud. He was crossing the line from ungrateful son to felon in real time. He was planning to steal a $2 million property, sell it for pennies on the dollar, to a predatory investor just to cover his gambling losses. He was going to burn down the kingdom I built to light a cigarette. But then came the question I was dreading. The person on the other end of the line must have asked about me, about the occupant. "Don't worry about him," Bradley said. The disdain in his voice was so thick it was almost physical. "He won't be a problem. I found a place. It's called Shady Acres. It's a state-subsidized facility about 2 hours north." Shady Acres. I knew the place. It was a warehouse for the indigent. A place where the smell of urine and bleach was permanent, where the staff was overworked and underpaid, and where the elderly were sedated into silence. It was a place you sent people you wanted to forget. "It's cheap," Bradley explained. "It will take almost all of his monthly pension check, so I won't have to pay a dime out of pocket. They have a bed opening up on Tuesday." I told them he's aggressive and prone to wandering, so they agreed to put him in the secure ward. He won't have access to a phone. Once he's in there, he's gone. He'll be dead within 6 months, and then the rest of the trust unlocks. He said it so casually. Dead within 6 months. He wasn't just planning to move me. He was calculating my expiration date. He was banking on my death. He viewed my life as a timeline that was running too long. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the temperature of the hallway. It was the death of the last ember of hope I had held for my boy. I had thought perhaps he was just stressed, just selfish. But this was malice. He was willing to imprison me in a hellhole, strip me of my dignity, and forge my name, all to save his own skin. "Okay," Bradley said. "Tuesday. I'll have the money. Just call off your dogs." He hung up. I heard the sound of liquid being poured into a glass, the clink of a bottle against crystal. He was drinking my scotch, the 30-year-old single malt I kept in the bottom drawer for special occasions. He was drinking it to calm his nerves after plotting to destroy his father. I stepped back, my movements silent. I didn't confront him. If I burst in there now, I would just be an angry old man. He would deny it. He would gaslight me. He would accelerate his timeline. No. I needed to be smarter. I needed to be the man who survived the crash of '87 and the dot-com bubble. I retreated to my room. I closed the door and locked it quietly. I sat on the edge of my bed, my heart hammering a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small digital recorder I had started carrying since the dinner table incident. The red light was still blinking. I stopped the recording. I had it all. The confession of fraud, the conspiracy to forge legal documents, the intent to commit elder abuse. I plugged the recorder into my laptop and uploaded the file to the secure server Sullivan monitored. I typed a short message to accompany the file. Phase 2 is authorized. Execute the scorched earth protocol immediately. I looked at the clock. It was 2:35. Tuesday. He said he was moving me on Tuesday. That gave me 4 days. 4 days to let him think he was winning. 4 days to let him dig the hole so deep he would never climb out. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. I didn't feel fear anymore. I didn't feel sadness. I felt a strange, icy clarity. My son wanted to treat me like a liability. Fine. I would become the greatest liability he had ever known. He wanted to sell the house. He would find out what happens when you try to sell a fortress that belongs to the king. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I visualized the bank accounts. I visualized the company assets. I visualized the flow of money that kept Bradley's life afloat. In my mind, I began to turn the valves one by one, shutting off the water. Tuesday, I whispered to the empty room. I would be ready for Tuesday. But Bradley wouldn't even make it to Monday. The morning fog was thick enough to hide a man's intentions, which was exactly what I needed. I left the house at 8 sharp wearing my shabby raincoat and carrying a canvas tote bag that looked like it held library books. To anyone watching from the kitchen window, specifically my daughter-in-law Monica, I was just a defeated old man trudging to the bus stop to save a few dollars on gas. I walked with a stoop, a slight limp in my left leg, playing the part of the burden they were so desperate to discard. I walked 3 blocks, turning the corner past the convenience store where Bradley used to buy baseball cards with the allowance I gave him. But the moment I turned onto 4th Street, the limp vanished. I straightened my spine. My chin came up. The air of a man waiting for death evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard steel of a man who had once made grown men cry in boardrooms. A black Maybach sedan was idling at the curb, its windows tinted dark enough to swallow the light. The driver, a man named Carl, who had been on my private payroll for 15 years, stepped out and opened the rear door without a word. "Good morning, Mr. Douglas," Carl said. "Good morning, Carl. Take me to the tower." I slid into the leather interior. The smell of conditioned leather and fresh espresso filled the cabin. I stripped off the wet raincoat and tossed the flat cap onto the seat. Underneath, I was wearing a bespoke suit I had kept hidden in a garment bag at a private storage facility Carl managed. I changed in the back of the car as we glided through traffic. By the time we reached the financial district, the grandfather who ate cold meatloaf was gone. In his place was Douglas, the silent majority shareholder of a dozen shell corporations, the man whose signature could freeze assets across 3 continents. We pulled into the underground garage of the Sullivan building. I didn't need a visitor pass. I had my own elevator key. The doors opened directly into the penthouse office of Sullivan and Partners. Sullivan was waiting for me. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city I had helped build. He turned as I entered. He didn't offer me pity. He offered me a file thick enough to choke a horse. "Coffee black," Sullivan said, sliding a ceramic cup across the mahogany table. "And the autopsy report." I sat down. I didn't touch the coffee. I placed my hands flat on the table. "Tell me the damage, Sullivan. Don't sugarcoat it." Sullivan opened the file. He didn't look at me. He looked at the numbers. He respected the math more than the man, which was why I hired him. "It's a massacre, Douglas. A complete and total financial massacre." "Start with the company," I said. Sullivan pointed to a graph that looked like a heart monitor on a flat line. "Bradley Logistics is insolvent. Technically, it has been insolvent for 6 months. The only thing keeping the lights on is the monthly injection from your trust, which Bradley thinks is revenue. He isn't generating profit. He isn't even generating revenue. He's generating debt." I looked at the balance sheet. The numbers were bleeding red. "Where is the money going?" I asked. "The operating costs shouldn't be this high. The fleet is fully paid for. The warehouse is owned by the trust. It's not operating costs," Sullivan said, his voice dropping an octave. "It's embezzlement, pure and simple." He flipped a page. There were rows of highlighted transactions. "Credit card expenses," Sullivan read. "Corporate card. $7,000 at the Sapphire Club. That's a gentleman's club downtown. Recurring weekly charges. $5,000 at Saks Fifth Avenue. $3,000 at a boutique hotel in the city center." "Monica?" I asked. Sullivan shook his head. "No. Monica has her own card, which is maxed out on spa treatments and designer handbags, but these charges, these are for someone else." He slid a photograph across the table. It was a surveillance shot taken by a private investigator. It showed Bradley walking out of a jewelry store, his arm around a woman who was decidedly not Monica. She was young, perhaps 25, with blonde hair and a coat that cost more than my first car. "Her name is Vanessa," Sullivan said. "She's an Instagram model. Bradley has been paying the rent on her apartment in Soho for 2 years, $4,000 a month. paid directly from the logistics shipping account labeled as warehouse storage fees. I stared at the photo. My son. The man who screamed at me for a $200 doctor's bill was spending $4,000 a month to house a mistress while his wife sat at home drinking $40 wine. The hypocrisy wasn't just a character flaw, it was a lifestyle. There's more, Sullivan said. He didn't give me time to process the infidelity. He moved straight to the criminality. I looked at the cash withdrawals. ATM withdrawals, Sullivan said. Not from the corporate account, but from the employee pension fund. I felt the blood drain from my face. The pension fund. That was sacred. That was the money for the drivers, the warehouse workers, the people who actually did the work. He touched the pension fund, I whispered. My voice was dangerous even to my own ears. He rated it, Sullivan corrected. $200,000 over the last 8 months. He's been moving it in small tranches so the auditors wouldn't trigger a red flag immediately. But the quarterly review is next week. He knows he's going to be caught. That's why he's panicking. That's why he needs to sell the house. What did he do with $200,000, I asked. You can't spend that on dinner and girls. Sullivan flipped to the last section of the file. It was a dossier from a forensic accountant. Atlantic City, Sullivan said. And online sports books. Your son has a gambling addiction, Douglas. A severe one. We tracked the IP addresses. He's betting on everything. Football, horse racing, obscure cricket matches in India. He's chasing losses. The $500,000 debt I heard him talking about last night, I said. That's just the tip of the iceberg, Sullivan said. That $500,000 is what he owes the loan sharks, the dangerous ones. The syndicate. But he has lost nearly $1.5 million of company money in total over 3 years. He has drained the liquidity. He has leveraged the future of the company. If we don't intervene, the payroll checks will bounce this Friday. I sat back in my chair. The view of the city seemed to blur. $1.5 million. Money I had earned by sweating blood. Money I had set aside to ensure my grandchildren would never know want. And he had burned it. He had burned it on roulette wheels and women and vanity. He stood in my kitchen and called me a burden, I said softly. He took my car keys because he said gas was too expensive. And all the while he was lighting cigars with $100 bills he stole from his own employees. It gets worse, Douglas, Sullivan said. He hesitated for the first time. Tell me. The taxes. He hasn't paid payroll taxes for 3 quarters. The IRS is already sniffing around. If this goes on for another month, it's not just bankruptcy. It's federal prison, for him. And potentially for you, as the silent owner if they think you were negligent. That was the kicker. He wasn't just ruining himself. He was dragging my name, my reputation, the reputation I had spent 50 years building into the mud with him. He was exposing me to liability. I stood up. I walked to the window. I looked down at the ants crawling on the pavement 40 stories below. One of those ants was my son, a man who thought he was a king because I had built him a castle, not realizing he was just a squatter in the throne room. He thinks he is going to put me in a home on Tuesday, I said to the glass. He thinks he is going to forge my signature and sell my house to pay off his bookie. He has the paperwork drawn up, Sullivan confirmed. We intercepted the emails to his lawyer, a cheap strip mall guy who asks no questions. They plan to file the competency hearing on Wednesday morning right after they drop you off at Shady Acres. I turned back to Sullivan. The sadness was gone. The shock was gone. What remained was a cold mathematical clarity. I was no longer a father. I was a liquidator, and I had a toxic asset to remove from the balance sheet. Freeze it, I said. Sullivan looked at me, his pen hovering over his legal pad. Everything, I said. Initiate the kill switch on the trust. I want every account associated with Bradley Logistics frozen by 9 a.m. tomorrow. I want the corporate credit cards canceled. Not declined, canceled. Reported stolen if you have to. I want the locks changed on the warehouse. I want the security codes reset. And the house, Sullivan asked. The house belongs to the trust, I said. Evict them. Sullivan raised an eyebrow. Evict your son. He is not my son right now, I said. He is a trespasser. He is a thief. Serve him with a notice to vacate. Give him 24 hours. And the debt, Sullivan asked. The loan sharks. If we cut off his money, they will come for him. Let them come, I said. He wanted to be a big man. Big men pay their own debts. I am done subsidizing his destruction. I picked up the file. I looked at the picture of the mistress. I looked at the picture of the casino floor. Prepare the plane, I said. I'm leaving tomorrow. Where to? Somewhere warm, I said. Somewhere where the phone doesn't ring. But before I go, I have one last performance to give. I closed the file with a snap that echoed in the silent office. Tonight is dinner, I said. Monica said she was making something special. I think I'll attend. I want to look him in the eye one last time. I want to see if there is any soul left in there before I crush him. You know what you're doing, Douglas Sullivan said quietly. There is no coming back from this. Once you pull this trigger, the family is dead. The family died the moment he decided to sell me for parts, I said. I'm just signing the death certificate. I walked out of the office. I didn't take the car back. I walked to the subway. I needed to be among the people again. I needed to remember what real struggle looked like so I wouldn't feel an ounce of guilt when I stripped my son of his unearned privilege. He wanted reality. I was about to give him a dose of reality so strong it would choke him. I rode the train back to the suburbs, clutching my tote bag, the master architect of my own son's demise, heading home for one last supper. The subway ride back to the suburbs was long enough for the adrenaline to fade, and for a cold, heavy resolve to settle in its place. I walked from the station to the house under the cover of a twilight that felt more like an ending than a beginning. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and black, reflecting the streetlights like oil. When I reached the driveway, I saw the windows of the house glowing with a warmth that was entirely artificial. From the outside, it looked like the American dream. Inside it was a den of thieves. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the foyer. The smell of roasted garlic and truffle oil hung heavy in the air. Monica wasn't cooking. She didn't know how to cook anything that didn't come from a microwave. This was catered. I recognized the scent. It was from Giacomo's, an Italian place downtown where a pasta dish cost $30. They were celebrating. They were celebrating the solution to their problems, and I knew before I even took off my coat that I was the problem they had solved. I walked into the dining room. The table was set with the good china, my late wife's china. There were crystal glasses and a bottle of Barolo breathing on a coaster. Bradley sat at the head of the table, his face flushed, a glass, already half empty, in his hand. Monica was opposite him, scrolling on her phone, a ring light clipped to the top of it. Leo was absent, likely in his room, destroying zombies on a console I had paid for. You're late, Bradley said, not looking up from his wine. Sit down. The food is getting cold. I sat in my usual spot, the chair that felt increasingly like the dock of the accused. I unfolded my napkin. It was linen, crisp and white. Where is Leo? I asked. He's eating in his room, Monica said, putting her phone down. We wanted to talk to you, privately. The tone was different tonight. It wasn't the explosive rage of the medical bill incident. It wasn't the dismissive cruelty of the car keys. It was something smoother, more rehearsed. It was the tone of a corporate HR manager firing an employee they had already replaced. We have some news, Monica said, smiling. Her teeth were very white, capped with veneers that cost $10,000. I'm launching a new venture, a lifestyle brand. I'm going to be streaming daily content about home organization and high-end living. I looked at the truffle risotto on my plate. High-end living funded by embezzlement and fraud. It was almost poetic. That sounds ambitious, I said neutrally. It is, Monica agreed, her eyes gleaming. But to do it right, I need a dedicated studio. The lighting in the living room is inconsistent and the basement is too damp. I need a space with good natural light and the right dimensions. I knew where this was going before the words left her mouth. My room, the guest suite on the ground floor. It had the bay window facing the garden. It had the morning sun. We need your room, Douglas, she said. It's the only space that works for the aesthetic I'm going for. I slowly cut a piece of the chicken parmigiana. It was tender. Giacomo's always did a good job. I see, I said. And where exactly do you propose I sleep? The garage. Don't be difficult, Dad. Bradley cut in. His voice was heavy with the false patience of a man dealing with a slow child. We've thought about this. We've crunched the numbers. And honestly, this arrangement isn't working anymore. What arrangement? I asked. The one where I live in my own house. It's not your house, Bradley snapped, his facade cracking for a second before he smoothed it over. It's a company asset. And as CEO, I have to maximize asset utilization. Having you occupy prime square footage for zero return is bad business. Plus, with the financial restructuring we can't afford to support a dependent adult in a luxury environment. Financial restructuring. That was a polite way of saying, I gambled away the payroll and need to sell the roof over our heads. So Bradley continued, leaning forward, his elbows on the table. We found a solution, a better solution. We found a place for you. He pulled a brochure from his pocket and slid it across the tablecloth. It was a glossy pamphlet, but the paper felt cheap. The logo said, The Sunnyvale Residence. It's a boarding house, Bradley explained. It's about 40 minutes from here, out past the industrial park. It's very affordable, $800 a month. That leaves you with enough from your pension for whatever it is you do, toothpaste, newspapers. I looked at the brochure. I didn't need to open it to know what Sunnyvale was. It was a converted motel. Single rooms, shared bathrooms down the hall, a hot plate for a kitchen. It was a place for people who had fallen through the cracks of society. It was a place for people who had no one. $800, I repeated. It's a steal, really, Monica added, picking up her wine glass. And the best part is you'll be around people your own age. You won't be lonely. You won't be underfoot here while we are trying to build our future. Underfoot. The word hung in the air, heavy and ugly. You are kicking me out, I said. It wasn't a question. We are resizing, Bradley corrected. We are cutting costs. You said you didn't want to waste my money. Well, housing you here costs me money. The electricity, the water, the food. It adds up. This way you pay your own way. You learn to be self-sufficient. It's what you would have wanted, right? You always talked about the value of hard work and independence. He was using my own philosophy against me. He was twisting the lessons I had tried to teach him into a weapon to sever our ties. He looked proud of himself. He thought he was being clever. He thought he was finally the alpha male of the family, making the hard decisions. When I asked, Tuesday, Bradley said, I already paid the deposit. First and last month. Consider it a parting gift. I'll drive you over in the morning. You can pack your things this weekend, but keep it light. The rooms are cozy. You won't have space for all your junk. Junk. He meant the photo albums. He meant the books. He meant the few mementos of his mother I had kept. So Tuesday, I said. That gives me 3 days. 3 days to say goodbye, Monica said, though she was already looking at the wall behind me, measuring it for her studio backdrop. I looked at my son. I looked at the man who was currently wearing a watch I had bought him for his graduation, a watch worth more than a year's rent at Sunnyvale. I looked at the dark circles under his eyes, the tremor in his hand as he held his wine glass. He was terrified. He was desperate. And in his desperation, He had decided that the only way to save himself was to sacrifice me. He wasn't just kicking me out. He was discarding me to clear the board for his fraud. He needed me gone so he could forge the deed. He needed me gone so he could liquidate the asset. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't pain. It wasn't anger. It was the final click of a lock snapping shut. The last thread of paternal instinct. The instinct to protect, to forgive, to guide severed completely. I picked up my wine glass. It was a 2015 Barolo. Excellent vintage. I swirled the dark red liquid. "You're right, Bradley," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice I used when I fired a board of directors for incompetence. I have been a burden. I have been taking up space, and if you need the room to build your future, then I should go. Bradley blinked. He hadn't expected this. He had expected a fight. He had expected begging. He had prepared arguments, threats, maybe even security. He didn't know what to do with acceptance. He said, lowering his guard. "Well, good. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this, Dad. It's for the best." "Really?" "It is," I agreed. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted like iron and earth. "It is definitely for the best." I looked at Monica. "I hope your lifestyle brand is a success, Monica. I hope you get everything you deserve." "Thank you, Douglas," she said, not catching the double meaning. "I think it's going to be huge." I finished my wine in one swallow. I stood up. "I'm going to go to my room now," I said. "I have a lot of packing to do." "You do that," Bradley said, returning to his food with the appetite of a man who thinks he has escaped the gallows. "We'll handle the cleanup." I walked out of the dining room. I walked down the hall to the guest suite. I entered the room that was about to become a studio for vanity. I closed the door. I didn't turn on the light. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden one last time. The rain had started again, a slow, steady drizzle. Tuesday. He wanted me out on Tuesday. He didn't know that by Tuesday, the locks on this house wouldn't open for him. He didn't know that by Tuesday, the car in the driveway would be repossessed. He didn't know that by Tuesday, the name Bradley Logistics would be synonymous with bankruptcy. He had given me a deadline. I accepted it. I went to the closet and pulled out my small suitcase again. I unpacked the few things I had thrown in there the night before. I folded my shirts carefully. I placed the photo of my wife on the nightstand. I was going to enjoy this weekend. I was going to sleep soundly. I was going to eat their food and drink their wine. I was going to let them believe they had won. Because the fall is so much harder when you think you are flying. I sat on the bed and took out my satellite phone. I sent one text message to Sullivan. "The eviction is confirmed for Tuesday. Execute the sequence at 0900 hours Monday. Leave them nothing." I put the phone away. I lay down on the bed. For the first time in months, the knot in my stomach was gone. My son had told me to stop wasting his money. Message received, son. Message received. Monday morning arrived with the precision of a guillotine blade. The sky was a sharp, cloudless blue, the kind of weather that usually signals new beginnings. But for my son, it signaled the end of his world. Before I reveal what I did next, I need to know something. If you're still here, comment the number 1 below. I want to know you're watching with me until the truth comes out. And just so you're aware, the next part of this story includes dramatized elements created for storytelling purposes. Some details may not be entirely factual if that's not for you. This is the moment you can choose to stop watching. I left the house at 8:30 just as I had the previous days, wearing my worn-out raincoat and carrying my canvas bag. Bradley was still asleep. I had heard him come in at 3 in the morning, stumbling drunk, muttering about bad luck and worse odds. He was sleeping the sleep of a man who thought he had bought himself a future by selling his father. He didn't know that his future had already been foreclosed. I walked to the corner, but I didn't wait for the bus. Carl was there in the Maybach. I slid into the back seat, the heavy door sealing with a reassuring thud that shut out the noise of the suburbs. I changed into my charcoal three-piece suit, tied my silk tie with steady hands, and put on my gold cufflinks. They were heavy, cold, and real, just like the authority I was about to wield. We drove to the financial district, but this time we didn't go to Sullivan's office. We went to the headquarters of the Sovereign Mercantile Bank. It was a fortress of glass and steel that dominated the skyline. I didn't use the public entrance. My name was on a very short list of clients who used the underground executive arrival bay. Sullivan met me at the elevator. He was carrying a leather portfolio and looked like an undertaker who enjoyed his work. "Good morning, Mr. Douglas," Sullivan said. "The team is assembled in the private wealth suite. Henderson is waiting." Henderson was the regional president of the bank. He was the only person in the building other than Sullivan who knew the true structure of the Douglas Trust. To everyone else, Bradley Logistics was a mid-sized company run by a young, aggressive CEO. To Henderson, it was just line item 42 in my portfolio. We rode the elevator to the 55th floor. The doors opened into a lobby that smelled of orchids and old money. Henderson was there, his hand extended. He looked nervous. He should be. He had let my son run wild with my money for too long, assuming my silence was permission. Douglas Henderson said, his voice hushed. "We have everything prepared as you requested. But are you sure this is nuclear?" I walked past him into the conference room. It was a vast space with a table long enough to land a plane on. The view of the city was breathtaking, a sprawling grid of commerce and ambition. I sat at the head of the table. "I am not here for a debate, Henderson," I said, placing my hands on the polished wood. "I am here for an execution. Bring up the accounts." Henderson nodded to a junior analyst who was sitting at a computer terminal connected to the main wall screen. The analyst, a young man who looked terrified, typed in a command. The screen flickered to life. It displayed a complex web of accounts under the umbrella of Bradley Logistics LLC. There were operating accounts, payroll accounts, capital expenditure, lines, and credit facilities. Everything was green. Everything was labeled active. The numbers were staggering. Even knowing the extent of the theft, seeing it laid out on the bank's secure server was visceral. I saw the flow of money. I saw the $10,000 transfer to the Sapphire Club, pending for today. I saw the $4,000 rent check for the apartment in Soho, scheduled to clear at noon. I saw the payroll withdrawal scheduled for Friday, which I knew was unfunded, because the account balance was effectively zero, kept alive only by the overdraft protection backed by my personal guarantee. I looked at the screen. It represented my son's life. It represented his ego. And I held the remote control. "Let's begin with the corporate credit facility," I said. "The Amex Centurion and the Visa Infinite attached to the CEO's discretionary fund." Sullivan slid a document across the table. It was a corporate resolution signed by me 10 minutes ago in the car, removing Bradley as an authorized signatory effective immediately. Henderson looked at the document. He stamped it. He nodded to the analyst. "Execute," Henderson said. The analyst typed. On the big screen, the status next to the credit cards blinked. It changed from active to suspended. Then a second later to terminated. Reported fraudulent. I felt a surge of cold satisfaction. Somewhere in the city, or perhaps still sleeping in his bed, Bradley had a piece of black plastic in his wallet that was now just a piece of plastic. If he tried to buy a coffee, it would decline. If he tried to pay off a loan shark, it would trigger a security alert. Now the operating accounts, I said. This was the main artery. This was the account that paid the vendors the warehouse lease, the insurance. Sullivan spoke up. "We are invoking Clause 7A of the Trust Agreement, material breach of fiduciary duty. We are freezing the assets pending a forensic audit." The analyst looked at Henderson for confirmation. It was a massive move. It would paralyze the company instantly. Trucks wouldn't move. Gas cards wouldn't work. The company would essentially cease to exist as a functioning entity within the hour. "Do it," Henderson said. The analyst's fingers flew across the keyboard. I watched the screen. The green lights next to the operating accounts turned amber, indicating pending review, and then with a final keystroke, they turned a deep, angry red. Frozen. It was mesmerizing. It was the digital equivalent of stopping a heart. "The Soho apartment lease," I said. "That is an automatic ACH transfer from the shipping logistics account. Cancel it." The analyst navigated to the recurring payments tab. He found the entry V. Miller, consulting fees. "Cancel it," I commanded. Click. The line item vanished. Deleted. The payment that was supposed to clear at noon would bounce. Vanessa, the Instagram model, was about to have a very bad day. "Now for the house," I said. This was the tricky part. The house was owned by a holding company, DL Holdings, which was owned by the trust. Bradley paid the utilities, but the mortgage, or rather the property tax and maintenance fees, since I had bought it cash, were paid by the company. "I want the utility auto payments canceled," I said. "I want the security monitoring contract canceled. And I want the title flagged. Place a lien on the property in the name of the trust for the value of the embezzled funds. $2 million. Henderson frowned. "You are placing a lien on your own property. I am placing a lien on the asset to prevent any unauthorized sale," I explained. "Bradley thinks he can forge a deed transfer. If he tries to sell it now, the title search will pull up a $2 million debt to the Douglas Trust. No investor will touch it. He will be trying to sell a burning building." "Done," the analyst said. "The lien is registered in the county database." I leaned back in the leather chair. I felt lighter. I felt a sense of power returning to my veins, a power I had suppressed for years, playing the role of the benevolent, doting father. I had let him walk all over me because I thought it would help him walk tall. I realized now that you cannot build a man by cushioning his falls. You build him by letting him hit the concrete. "There is one more thing," Sullivan said, tapping a specific line on the spreadsheet. "The personal accounts." I looked at the screen. Bradley had been stupid. In his arrogance, he had linked his personal checking and savings accounts to the corporate overdraft as a backup funding source. He thought it made him look solvent to the bank. He didn't realize that by commingling the funds, he had exposed his personal assets to corporate liability, since we have declared the corporate accounts fraudulent due to embezzlement. Sullivan explained, his voice devoid of emotion. "The bank has the right to claw back funds from any linked accounts to cover the deficit. This is standard procedure for fraud recovery." I looked at the balance in Bradley's personal savings. It wasn't much. $40,000. Probably what was left of the last injection I had given him. It was the money he and Monica were using to pay for their lifestyle while the company burned. It was the money they would use to buy groceries, to put gas in the car, to pay for Leo's private school tuition. If I took this, I would leave them with nothing. Literally nothing. They wouldn't be able to buy milk. They wouldn't be able to pay the toll on the highway. I thought about the medical bill. I thought about the bus ride in the rain. I thought about the brochure for Sunnyvale. I thought about him planning to lock me away until I died. "Empty it," I said. The room went silent. Even Henderson looked uncomfortable. Douglas Henderson said softly, "This will clear him out. He won't have access to cash. He won't be able to, well, exist." He told me to stop wasting his money, I said, my voice hard as diamonds. "I am simply ensuring that no more of the trust's money is wasted. Recover the funds, transfer everything from his personal checking and savings into the trust's holding account to offset the embezzlement. Leave the accounts open, but leave the balance at zero." The analyst looked at me. I nodded. He pressed the key. I watched the number on the screen. $42. $350,000. It blinked once. Then it changed. Zero. It was gone. In a millisecond, $40,000 was stripped from him. He was now, for all intents and purposes, destitute. And just like that, the illusion of Bradley, the CEO Bradley, the big shot Bradley, the master of the universe, was deleted. All that remained was Bradley the thief. I stood up. The feeling of power was intoxicating, but it was mixed with a profound, aching sadness. I had just destroyed my son, but I had to remind myself that I wasn't the one who destroyed him. I was just the one turning on the lights so he could see the wreckage he had created. "Thank you, Henderson," I said. I walked to the window one last time. I looked down at the city. Somewhere down there, Bradley was waking up. He was probably reaching for his phone to check his sports bets. He was probably thinking about his coffee. He had no idea that he was already dead. Sullivan packed the files. "What now?" Sullivan asked. "Now we deliver the paperwork," I said. I didn't want a courier to do it. I didn't want an email. I wanted it to be physical. "Have the process server meet me at the office," I said, "and draft the termination letter. Cause for termination, gross misconduct, embezzlement, and fraud. Effective immediately." I walked out of the conference room. The hum of the bank floor sounded different to me now. It wasn't just the sound of commerce. It was the sound of consequences. I took the elevator down to the garage. Carl was waiting. "Where to, sir?" Carl asked. "The office," I said. "Bradley Logistics. It's time to fire the CEO." As the car pulled out into the traffic, I checked my watch. It was 10 a.m. Bradley usually rolled into the office around 11, hungover and demanding. Today he would find the doors locked. Today he would find his keycard deactivated. Today he would find out that the golden goose hadn't just stopped laying eggs, it had turned into a dragon. I touched the breast pocket of my suit. The satellite phone was there. The passport was there. I was ready to disappear. But first I had to watch the fire start. I had to make sure it burned hot enough to cauterize the wound. I sat back and closed my eyes. I pictured the moment Bradley would hand his card to a waiter at lunch. I pictured the moment the decline message would appear. I pictured the moment he would check his bank app and see the zero. It was cruel, it was brutal, and it was exactly what he had ordered. The car ride from the bank to the industrial park where Bradley Logistics was headquartered took 20 minutes. It was 20 minutes of silence. I watched the city give way to warehouses and distribution centers, the engine room of the economy. I saw trucks with my family name painted on the side rolling down the highway. I saw the legacy I had built from nothing, and I felt a strange detachment. It was like looking at a house you used to live in before it burned down. The structure was still there, but the life inside was gone. We pulled up to the security gate. The guard, a man named Miller, who had worked for me for 10 years, stepped out of the booth. He saw the Maybach. He didn't know the car, but he knew the authority it projected. He leaned down. When he saw me in the back seat, his eyes went wide. He started to salute, then stopped, confused by the suit. He was used to seeing me in a cardigan bringing donuts for the night shift. "Open the gate, Miller," I said, rolling down the window just an inch. "And do not announce me." "Yes, Mr. Douglas." "Right away, sir." The gate lifted. We drove through. We parked in the spot marked CEO. It was empty. It was 10:30 in the morning, and the chief executive officer was not at his post. He was likely nursing a hangover or dodging phone calls from loan sharks. It didn't matter. He would never park in this spot again. I walked into the building with Sullivan flanking me. The receptionist, a new girl Bradley had hired based on her looks rather than her typing speed, looked up from her phone. She didn't recognize me. To her, I was just an old man who sometimes waited in the lobby for a ride. "Can I help you?" she asked, popping gum. I didn't answer. I walked past her desk. "Sir, you can't go back there," she shouted. "That's a restricted area." Sullivan stopped at her desk. He placed a single card on the glass surface. "This is Mr. Douglas, the owner of the building, and the chairman of the board," Sullivan said calmly. "You might want to update your resume." We walked down the hallway. I saw employees chatting in the break room. I saw offices with empty chairs. The culture of the company reflected its leader lazy, entitled and rotting from the inside. We reached the executive suite. The door to Bradley's office was closed. I didn't knock. I opened it. The office was lavish. He had redecorated it 6 months ago. Italian leather sofas, a wet bar fully stocked, a desk made of reclaimed teak that cost $12,000. On the wall there was a massive portrait of himself. Not the company founder. Not the team. Just Bradley smiling that arrogant smile. I sat in his chair. It was too soft. It was a chair designed for napping, not working. Sullivan opened his briefcase and laid 3 blank documents on the desk. "Let's begin," I said. "First, the termination." Sullivan uncapped a fountain pen. He began to draft the language on a legal pad before we would type it up on the official letterhead. "We are terminating for cause," Sullivan said, his voice echoing in the large room. Article 14 of his employment contract. Gross misconduct. Misappropriation of corporate funds. Negligence. Add fraud, I said. And breach of fiduciary duty. I want the language to be airtight. I want it to be impossible for him to claim unemployment. I want it to be impossible for him to get a job managing a lemonade stand after this. Sullivan wrote. Effective immediately, Sullivan recited. You are hereby relieved of all duties. You are stripped of all titles. All company assets in your possession, including vehicles, electronics, and access keys, must be surrendered forthwith. And the severance, I asked, knowing the answer. Null and void, Sullivan said. Under the clawback provision for criminal misconduct, he forfeits all accrued bonuses, stock options, and severance pay. He leaves with nothing but the box he packs his desk in. Good, I said. Type it. Sullivan pulled out his laptop and connected to the wireless printer in the corner. The hum of the machine whirring to life was the only sound in the room. Now the civil suit, I said. This was the heavy artillery. Firing him took away his income. The lawsuit would take away his future. We are filing a complaint for restitution, Sullivan said. We are seeking the return of the $2.2 million embezzled over the last 36 months, plus interest, plus legal fees, plus punitive damages for the reputational harm to the Douglas Trust. Draft it, I said. I watched Sullivan type. I thought about the $2 million. I thought about how many shifts my drivers had to work to generate that kind of revenue. I thought about the pension fund he had raided. He won't be able to pay it. Sullivan reminded me, pausing his typing. He is broke. This judgment will follow him for the rest of his life. We will garnish every paycheck he ever earns. We will seize any asset he ever acquires. He will never be able to own a home, a car, or even a credit card again. That is the point, Sullivan, I said. He wanted to live like a king on my dime. Now he will live like a pauper on his own. He wanted to declare me incompetent. I am declaring him insolvent. Permanently. Sullivan nodded. He understood. He finished the document. The printer churned out the pages. They were thick, heavy bond paper. Legal weapons of mass destruction. I signed them. My signature was firm. It didn't shake. It was the signature of the man who built this empire, not the old man who shook with the palsy Bradley imagined I had. Now the letter, I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a sheet of personal stationery. It was cream-colored with my monogram embossed at the top. I took the fountain pen from Sullivan. This one I had to write myself. No lawyer could draft this. This wasn't legal. This was personal. I stared at the blank page. What do you say to the son you are about to destroy? Do you tell him you loved him? Do you tell him you are sorry it came to this? Apologies were for mistakes. This was a correction. I began to write. Bradley, for 40 years I tried to give you the life I never had. I thought that by shielding you from the rain, I was helping you grow. I see now that I only made your roots shallow. You sat at my table and told me I was a burden. You told me to stop wasting your money. You planned to lock me away in a facility so you could sell the house I built to pay for your vices. You looked at your father and saw only a line item to be deleted. You wanted me to stop wasting money. I have honored your request. I have stopped wasting my money on you. The company is gone. The house is gone. The bank accounts are empty. The safety net you have bounced on your entire life has been cut. You are now a self-made man, Bradley. You have exactly what you earned. Nothing. Do not look for me. Do not call the lawyer. The police have the evidence of your fraud, and the IRS has the evidence of your tax evasion. If you try to find me, I will hand those files over. Consider my silence the last gift I will ever give you. You wanted independence. Enjoy it. Goodbye. Douglas. I signed it. I didn't add "Love, Dad." That title had been revoked. I folded the letter. I placed it in an envelope. I wrote his name on the front. I arranged the documents on the center of his desk. The termination letter on the left. The lawsuit on the right. And my personal letter in the middle resting on top of his leather-bound planner. I looked around the office. I saw the humidor on the shelf. I walked over and opened it. It was full of Cuban cigars I had bought him for his birthday. I took one. I cut the tip with the silver cutter on the desk. I lit it. I took a long drag. The smoke filled the room, thick and pungent. "Let's go, Sullivan," I said. We walked out of the office. The receptionist was typing furiously on her phone, probably texting a friend about the crazy old man who claimed to be the owner. She didn't look up. We went down the elevator. We walked out into the sunlight. The process server was waiting by the Maybach. He was a large man with a thick neck and a face that said he didn't care about sob stories. "He's not in yet," I told the server. "But he will be soon. Wait for him in the lobby. When he tries to use his keycard and it fails, hand him the papers." "Will do, Mr. Douglas." I got into the car. Carl closed the door. "To the airfield, Carl." The car pulled away. I didn't look back at the building. I didn't look back at the legacy. It was just concrete and steel now. As we merged onto the highway, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank. Alert: credit card attempt. Declined. Amount $14.50. Merchant Starbucks. I smiled. It had begun. He was trying to buy his morning coffee, and for the first time in his life he couldn't. I imagined the scene. The barista waiting. Bradley tapping the card again, annoyed. The line forming behind him. The shame. It was a small thing, a cup of coffee, but it was the first crack in the dam. Within the hour, the flood would consume him. I settled back into the seat. The leather was soft. The ride was smooth. I was done writing letters. I was done signing papers. Now I was just a ghost with a private jet and a bottle of scotch waiting on ice. My son had wanted me to disappear. I was simply granting his wish. The drive from the industrial park back to the suburbs was the final leg of a journey that had lasted 40 years. Carl drove the Maybach with the smooth, silent precision of a man who knew his passenger was carrying the weight of the world, or perhaps the weight of shedding it. We didn't speed. There was no rush anymore. The papers were signed. The accounts were frozen. The fuse had been lit at the bank, and the bomb had been planted on Bradley's desk. Now I simply had to clear the blast radius. We pulled up to the curb a block away from the house. I told Carl to wait. I didn't want the neighbors to see the luxury car. I wanted my exit to be as pathetic and invisible as my presence had been for the last decade. I walked the final stretch to the driveway. The house stood there white and pristine, the lawn manicured by a service I paid for, the windows shining. It looked like a monument to success. It was actually a mausoleum for a dead family. I unlocked the front door. The house was silent. Monica was out, likely at the gym or getting her nails done, spending the last few dollars of credit she didn't know she no longer had. Leo was at school. Bradley was at this very moment likely staring at the locked glass doors of his office building, confused and beginning to panic. I stood in the foyer. I listened to the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I listened to the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. These were the sounds of my life. I had bought that clock in London 30 years ago. I had bought the refrigerator when Leo was born, so they would have enough space for baby formula. Every object in this house, every stick of furniture, every rug, was a testament to my love for them. And they had looked at it all and seen only inventory. I walked to the guest room, my room, or as Monica called it, her future studio. I opened the door. The bed was made. The small suitcase I had packed over the weekend sat on the floor. It contained my old shirts, my worn-out trousers, the few toiletries I was allowed to buy with my allowance. I looked at the suitcase. It was the baggage of a dependent. It was the luggage of a man heading to a state-run facility to die. I didn't touch it. I left it right there in the middle of the floor. I walked to the closet. I took off the bespoke charcoal suit I had worn to the bank. I folded it carefully and placed it in the bag I had brought from the car. I put the old fraying cardigan back on. I put on the scuffed shoes. I wanted to leave this house exactly as the man they thought I was. I looked around the room one last time. There was nothing here I wanted. The books on the shelf, I had read them. The clothes, they were costumes. The only thing of value was the photograph of my wife on the nightstand. I picked it up. Her smile was frozen in time, capturing a moment from 30 years ago when we thought we were building a dynasty. I wondered what she would say if she were here. Would she beg me to stop, or would she be the one lighting the match? I tucked the photo into the inside pocket of my coat, next to my satellite phone and my passport. That was it. That was the sum total of what I was taking. A picture and my freedom. I walked out of the room. I didn't close the door. I wanted Monica to see the empty room and the abandoned suitcase when she came home. I wanted her to think just for a moment that I had dutifully marched myself off to the nursing home a day early to save them the trouble. I walked to the kitchen. I took the spare key to the house off my keyring. It was a small brass key. It had given me access to shelter, but never a home. I placed it on the center of the kitchen island. It sat there gleaming under the pendant lights. I didn't leave a note. I had written my letter to Bradley. Monica didn't deserve words. She deserved the silence that was coming for her. I walked out the front door. Out the front. I closed it softly. I heard the lock click. It was a mechanical sound, final and absolute. I didn't look back. I didn't look at the flower beds I had planted. I didn't look at the swing set in the backyard where I had pushed Leo when he was a toddler. Those memories were anchors, and I was cutting the chain. I walked down the driveway, my shoes crunching on the gravel. I walked past the mailbox that was stuffed with bills addressed to Bradley that he would never be able to pay. I walked to the corner where the Maybach waited. Carl opened the door. I slid in. I didn't change back into the suit this time. I sat there in my old man clothes, surrounded by the opulence of the car, a ghost in the machine. Teterboro, Carl said, and step on it. The drive to the airport was a blur of highway and concrete. My phone, the burner I used for family, was in my pocket. I turned it off. I didn't want to see the calls when they started coming. I didn't want to hear the panic. I took the SIM card out and snapped it in half. I rolled down the window just a crack and dropped the pieces onto the New Jersey Turnpike. They bounced and disappeared into the traffic. We arrived at the private airfield 40 minutes later. The security gate opened automatically as the car approached. We drove onto the tarmac. The jet was there. It was a Gulfstream G650, sleek and white, shimmering in the midday sun. It was a machine built for speed and distance. It was a machine built for people who commanded the world, not people who begged for a ride to the library. My pilot, Captain Reynolds, was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. He saluted as I got out of the car. "Welcome back, Mr. Douglas," he said. "We are cleared for immediate departure. Flight time to St. Kitts is 3 hours and 40 minutes. "Thank you, Reynolds," I said. I walked up the stairs. I entered the cabin. It smelled of fresh orchids and expensive leather. It was a different world. It was my world. I went to the master seat. I sat down and buckled the belt. The flight attendant, a woman named Sarah, who knew exactly how I liked my life organized, appeared instantly. "Can I get you anything before takeoff, sir?" she asked. I looked out the window. I saw the skyline of New York in the distance. Somewhere in that city, my son was currently realizing that his keycard didn't work. Somewhere in that city, a process server was handing him a lawsuit that would bury him. "Yes, Sarah," I said. "Open the Petrus. The 1989. She smiled. "An excellent choice, sir." The engines whined to life. The plane began to taxi. I felt the vibration in the floor, a rumble of power that surged through my body. We turned onto the runway. The pilot pushed the throttles forward. The force pushed me back into the seat. We accelerated. The ground blurred. And then, with a sudden, graceful lift, we were airborne. I watched the ground fall away. I saw the grid of streets, the cars moving like toys, the houses like Monopoly pieces. I saw the suburb where I had lived for 20 years, shrinking, until it was nothing but a gray smudge against the green. I was rising above it. I was rising above the pettiness, the ingratitude, the small, mean lives of the people who had tried to cage me. Sarah returned with a crystal glass and the bottle of wine. She poured it carefully. The liquid was dark, rich, the color of blood and garnets. She handed me the glass. "To your trip, sir," she said. "To clarity," I corrected. I took a sip. The wine was complex, with notes of truffle berries and earth. It tasted of history. It tasted of patience. It cost $5,000 a bottle. I closed my eyes and let the taste linger on my tongue. My son had screamed at me for spending $200 on a doctor to keep my heart beating. He had begrudged me the price of a bus ticket. He had wanted to warehouse me in a place that smelled of despair to save himself $800 a month. And here I was drinking a glass of wine that cost more than his mortgage payment and flying in a jet that burned more fuel in an hour than he would earn in a year. I felt a tear run down my cheek. It wasn't for me. It was for him. It was for the sheer monumental stupidity of his greed. He had been standing next to a fountain of youth, and he had died of thirst because he was too busy trying to sell the water rights. I wiped the tear away. I took another sip of the wine. I reached for the tablet stowed in the side pocket of the seat. I turned it on. I logged into the security system of the house I had just left. The cameras came online. I saw the driveway. It was empty. But then a car pulled in. It was Monica's BMW. She was home early. Maybe her card had been declined at the salon. I watched her walk to the front door. I watched her fumble with her keys. I watched her open the door and step inside. I switched the camera view to the interior. I saw her walk into the kitchen. I saw her stop. She was looking at the island. She was looking at the key I had left there. She picked it up. She looked confused. She called out a name, probably mine, or Bradley's. She walked to the guest room. She opened the door. I saw her stand there staring at the empty room, at the small suitcase in the middle of the floor. She pulled out her phone. She dialed a number. I took another sip of wine. "Make the call, Monica," I whispered to the screen. "Call him. Tell him I'm gone. Tell him the old man vanished. But he won't answer. Because right now he is reading a letter that tells him he doesn't have a phone plan anymore." I turned off the tablet. I didn't need to watch the rest. I knew the script. I looked out the window at the clouds. They were white and fluffy, a floor of cotton beneath me. The sun was shining up here, bright and blinding. I was free. I had emptied the accounts. I had emptied the house. I had emptied my life of the parasites. Now all that was left was the rest of my life, and I intended to enjoy every single expensive second of it. At 30,000 feet, the internet connection on the Gulf Stream was faster than most office networks. I sat in the leather recliner, the glass of Petrus resting on the side table, and watched the notifications roll in on my tablet. Each ping was a digital breadcrumb telling me exactly where my son was and exactly how his day was disintegrating. At 1:15 in the afternoon, the alert I had been waiting for finally arrived. It was a transaction attempt for $840 at the prime cut. A steakhouse downtown where the waiters wore tuxedos and the clientele wore their net worth on their wrists. I knew exactly who Bradley was having lunch with. He wasn't meeting a logistics client. He wasn't meeting a supplier. He was meeting a man named Varga. Sullivan's report had identified Varga as a mid-level enforcer for the gambling syndicate Bradley owed money to. Bradley had likely invited him to lunch to buy time to flash the corporate credit card, to pour expensive wine down the man's throat, while he spun lies about liquidating assets and incoming wire transfers. He was playing the part of the big-shot CEO one last time, trying to convince the shark not to bite. I closed my eyes and pictured the scene. I knew the restaurant well. I knew the table Bradley would have requested, table 4 in the corner by the window, where he could be seen but not heard. I could see him leaning back in the leather booth, laughing too loudly, his suit jacket unbuttoned to show off the monogram on his shirt. He would be sweating slightly despite the air conditioning, because Varga wasn't the kind of man who laughed at bad jokes. Then the check would arrive, a small black folder containing the judgment. Bradley wouldn't even look at the total. He was too arrogant for that. He would casually slide the black Amex Centurion card into the folder, barely breaking eye contact with Varga. He would smile that practiced oily smile and say something about writing it off as a business expense. I watched the tablet. Transaction declined. Reason account closed. Fraud alert. The waiter would have walked away with the folder. He would have gone to the terminal at the server station. He would have swiped the card. And then he would have frowned. He would have tried it again. Maybe he wiped the chip on his apron thinking it was a smudge. He tried a third time. The machine would have spit out a slip of paper with the words, "Do not honor." The walk back to the table is the longest walk a waiter can make. I imagined him approaching Bradley. He wouldn't want to embarrass a regular customer, so he would lean in close, whispering discreetly, "Sir, I'm afraid there is a problem with the card." Bradley's reaction would be immediate indignation. He would scoff. He would speak loud enough for Varga to hear, trying to perform dominance. "Don't be ridiculous. It's a Centurion. Run it again." The waiter would apologize. "I did, sir. It says do not honor." "Do you have another form of payment?" I saw the second notification pop up on my screen 2 minutes later. Transaction declined. Visa Corporate Infinite. Reason card canceled. This was the moment the sweat would turn cold. Bradley would be fumbling with his wallet now. The smile would be gone, replaced by a tight, confused grimace. He would pull out the Visa. "Try this one. It must be a chip error." Varga would be watching. He wouldn't be eating anymore. He would be staring at Bradley with dead, shark-like eyes. A man who can't pay for lunch definitely can't pay a $500,000 debt. The waiter would return again. The shake of the head. The second decline. Now the panic sets in. The real panic. The kind that constricts the throat and makes the room spin. Bradley would be digging deep into the leather slots of his wallet. He would bypass the corporate cards now. He would reach for his personal debit card, the one linked to his savings, the one he used for his secret life. He had $40,000 in there yesterday, plenty to cover a steak lunch. He would hand it over with a trembling hand. Just use my personal card. The bank must be updating the corporate system. I waited. The tablet refreshed. Transaction declined. Personal debit. Reason insufficient funds. Current balance $0. That was the kill shot. I imagined Bradley staring at the little machine the waiter had brought to the table. He would be staring at the word declined. He would pull out his phone. He would open his banking app, his fingers slipping on the screen because they were slick with grease and fear. He would log in. He would see the grayed-out boxes where his money used to be. He would see the corporate accounts vanished. He would see his personal savings showing a row of zeros that stretched into eternity. He wasn't just broke. He was erased. Varga would stand up then. He wouldn't make a scene. Men like Varga didn't need to scream. He would button his jacket. He would look down at my son, who was currently hyperventilating over a piece of plastic. You said you had the money, Bradley Varga would say softly. You said the house sale was a formality. But you can't even buy me a steak. It's a mistake, Bradley would stammer, his voice cracking. It's a glitch. My father, the bank, I can fix this. You have 24 hours, Varga would say. After that, we stop being polite. Varga would throw a $50 bill on the table for his share of the drinks and walk out, leaving Bradley alone with the bill, the waiter, and the ruin of his life. Bradley would be sitting there, the unpaid check for $800 staring him in the face. He couldn't pay it. He literally didn't have the money. He couldn't call the company accountant because the company didn't exist. He couldn't call Monica because she was spending money she didn't have. He couldn't call me because he thought I was packing a suitcase for the nursing home. He would have to do the unthinkable. He would have to leave collateral. I pictured him unclasping the Rolex Submariner from his wrist, the watch I gave him when he graduated business school. He would hand it to the manager, his face burning with a shame so hot it could melt steel. I'll come back for it, he would lie. I just need to sort out a wire transfer. He would walk out of the restaurant into the bright afternoon sun. He would reach for his car keys. He would walk to the parking garage where he kept the Range Rover. But the Range Rover wouldn't be there. I had instructed Sullivan to have the repo team waiting. The lease was in the company name. The company was in default. The GPS tracker would have led them right to him. Bradley would stand in the empty parking spot. No car, no money, no company, no friends. He would have to walk. He would have to walk through the city in his expensive suit, sweating, terrified, broke. He would have to walk to the office to figure out what was happening. But when he got to the office, he wouldn't find answers. He would find a process server waiting in the lobby with a stack of papers that weighed more than his conscience. I took a sip of the Petrus. The wine tasted like victory, but it had a bitter aftertaste. It was the taste of knowing that my son was currently feeling the same helplessness he had tried to inflict on me. He was standing on the precipice, and for the first time in his life there was no safety net. There was only the long, hard fall. I set the glass down. The tablet pinged again. Alert security system. Front door breach attempt. User Bradley. Access denied. He hadn't gone to the office. He had run home. He had run to safety. But safety had changed the locks. I zoomed in on the camera feed from the front porch. Bradley was there. He was banging on the door. He was shouting. He looked like a madman. His tie was crooked. His hair was wild. He was punching the keypad, trying his code over and over again. Invalid code. Invalid code. Invalid code. The house stood silent and impregnable. He was locked out of the kingdom. I watched him collapse onto the front step, burying his head in his hands. He was crying. He wasn't crying because he was sorry. He was crying because he was caught. He was crying because the toy had been taken away. I turned off the tablet. The show was over for now. The intermission was finished. The final act was about to begin, and it wasn't going to be a tragedy. It was going to be a lesson. I reclined the seat. The hum of the jet engines was a lullaby. I closed my eyes and drifted off to sleep, leaving my son on the doorstep of the life he used to own, waiting for a door that would never open again. I watched from 30,000 feet as the final stronghold of my son's arrogance crumbled. The security feed on my tablet was crystal clear, showing every bead of sweat on Bradley's forehead as he pounded on the mahogany front door of the house he believed was his. He looked like a man possessed, his expensive suit disheveled, his tie pulled loose, screaming at the wood and glass, as if volume alone could override the digital locks I had reprogrammed. He punched the keypad again and again, his fingers mashing the buttons in a frantic rhythm, but the small LED light remained a stubborn, unyielding red. He kicked the door, leaving a scuff mark on the finish, a final act of vandalism against a property he had treated with contempt for years. He shouted for Monica. He shouted for me. He screamed that the system was broken, that the batteries were dead, that the world had gone mad. He didn't realize that the system was working perfectly for the first time in years. It was keeping the parasites out. Suddenly, the door opened. Bradley stumbled forward, relief washing over his face, thinking perhaps I had heard him or Monica had unlocked it. But the figure standing in the doorway was not his wife, and it certainly wasn't his elderly father. It was a man named Stone, the head of the private security firm Sullivan retained for high-risk asset protection. Stone was 6 feet 4 inches of muscle and professionalism, dressed in a tactical black uniform that made it very clear he was not a doorman. Behind him stood 2 other agents blocking the view of the foyer. Bradley froze, his mouth hanging open. "Who are you?" he demanded, trying to summon the authority of a CEO, but sounding more like a frightened trespasser. "Get out of my house. I'm calling the police." Stone didn't blink. He stepped out onto the porch, forcing Bradley to retreat down the steps. "You can call the police if you wish." Mr. Hughes, Stone said, his voice a deep rumble that carried easily to the camera's microphone. "But they will simply confirm what I am about to tell you. You are trespassing on private property." Trespassing. Bradley sputtered, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "This is my house. I live here. My father lives here." "Where is he?" "What have you done with him?" Stone reached into his vest and pulled out a folded document. He handed it to Bradley. "This is a notice to quit and an order of immediate eviction," Stone stated. "You have been served, the locks have been changed, the security codes have been reset. You have exactly 1 hour to remove essential personal items under our supervision. Anything left after that hour will be cataloged and placed in storage at your expense." Bradley stared at the paper. He tried to read it, but his hands were shaking too hard. "This is insane," he yelled, tearing the paper in half and throwing it on the ground. "You can't evict me. I own this place. My name is on the deed. Or it will be. My father is incompetent. He doesn't know what he's doing." A black sedan pulled into the driveway behind Bradley. The door opened and Sullivan stepped out. He looked immaculate, calm, and utterly lethal. He walked up the driveway, stepping over the torn eviction notice as if it were a piece of trash. "Your father knows exactly what he is doing," Bradley Sullivan said, his voice cutting through the humid afternoon air. "And for the record, your name is not on the deed. It never was." Sullivan Bradley gasped, looking at the lawyer as if seeing a ghost. "Thank God. Tell these goons to leave. My father is... he's having an episode. He's disappeared." I need to get inside to find his medication. Sullivan stopped in front of him. He didn't offer a hand. He didn't offer comfort. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick file bound in red tape. Your father isn't having an episode, Sullivan said coldly. He is having a moment of clarity. And as for the house, let's be very clear about the legal standing here. Sullivan pulled out a document and held it up for Bradley to see. It was the original deed of trust. This property is owned by DL Holdings, a subsidiary of the Douglas Trust. Sullivan explained, speaking slowly so the reality would sink in. You, Bradley, are listed as a tenant at will. That means you live here solely at the pleasure of the trustee, and as of 9 o'clock this morning, that pleasure has been withdrawn. Bradley stared at the document. But I'm the CEO. The company pays for the house. The company is insolvent, Sullivan shot back. I filed the dissolution paperwork an hour ago. The assets are frozen. The lease is void. You don't have a job. You don't have a company. And you definitely don't have a house. At that moment, a taxi screeched to a halt at the curb. Monica got out. She looked frantic. Her hair was messy, her makeup smeared. She had clearly tried to use her credit cards and failed. She ran up the driveway, her heels clicking on the pavement, ignoring the security guards and rushing straight for Sullivan. What is going on? She screamed. My card was declined at the spa. They cut up my card in front of everyone. And now I can't get into the gate. Why are these men here? She looked at Bradley, waiting for him to fix it, waiting for him to yell at someone and make the money flow again. But Bradley just stood there looking at the ground, the weight of his failure crushing him. Tell her, Bradley, Sullivan said softly. Tell her who really owns the house. Tell her who really paid for the spa treatments. Bradley didn't speak. He couldn't. Sullivan turned to Monica. Mrs. Hughes, you are being evicted. Your husband has embezzled over $2 million from his father's company. He has committed fraud. He has raided the employee pension fund. And because the gravy train has finally derailed, you are now homeless. Monica's face went slack. She looked at the house, at the windows where she had planned to build her studio, at the garden she had used as a backdrop for her social media photos. She looked at the security guards who stood like statues blocking her entry to the life she thought she deserved. But, Douglas, she stammered. He's just an old man. He does what we say. We were going to move him. We had a plan. Sullivan laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Douglas is the man who built this city while you were still learning to tie your shoes. He played the part of the fool to see if you had any decency. You failed the test. Sullivan threw another packet of papers at Monica's feet. These are the divorce papers, he said, though he was bluffing slightly, merely delivering the financial ruin that would inevitably lead to it. Or rather, the asset seizure notices. The bank is repossessing your car, Monica, and your jewelry, and anything else purchased with stolen funds. Monica let out a wail that was pure, unadulterated selfishness. She didn't ask about Douglas. She didn't ask about the employees who had lost their pensions. She screamed about her things. My studio, she shrieked. My brand. You can't do this. Sullivan checked his watch. You have 45 minutes left to collect your essentials. I suggest you hurry. Mr. Stone here is very punctual, and once the time is up, the doors are bolted. He stepped aside, gesturing to the open door where the guards waited to escort them. It was the ultimate humiliation. They wouldn't be allowed to roam freely in the home they had treated as their kingdom. They would be watched. They would be monitored to ensure they didn't steal so much as a silver spoon. Bradley looked up at Sullivan, his eyes red and wet. Where is he? He whispered. Where is my father? Sullivan looked down at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. He is enjoying his retirement, Sullivan said. He asked me to give you a message. Bradley waited, a flicker of hope in his eyes. He said he hopes you learn to appreciate the value of a roof over your head now that you have to pay for it yourself. Bradley flinched as if he had been slapped. He walked past Sullivan, head down, defeated. Monica followed him, still sobbing about her injustice. They walked into the house flanked by security guards, not as owners, but as intruders being purged. I watched on the tablet as they disappeared into the foyer. I saw them walk past the grandfather clock. I saw them walk past the guest room where I had left my empty suitcase. They were walking into a life of ruin, and I was flying away from it. I closed the video feed. The connection severed. The screen went black. It was done. The house was reclaimed. The leeches were removed. I looked out the window of the jet. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I took a deep breath. For the first time in 10 years, I didn't have to worry about protecting my son from himself. I had let him fall. And the silence that followed was the most peaceful sound I had ever heard. The sun didn't just set on my son's empire that evening. It crashed into the earth with the violence of a falling star. From the comfort of my jet soaring above the Atlantic, I could only imagine the silence that descended on the cul-de-sac as the heavy oak door of the house clicked shut and the automatic deadbolts engaged with a final mechanical thud. Bradley and Monica stood on the pavement, surrounded by a pathetic scattering of Louis Vuitton suitcases and hastily packed cardboard boxes. They were the kings and queens of nothing ruling over a kingdom of asphalt and gravel. The humiliation wasn't finished. Sullivan was thorough. As they stood there debating who to call, the distinct grinding whine of a heavy diesel engine turned the corner. It wasn't a limousine to whisk them away to safety. It was a flatbed tow truck painted in the garish yellow of a repossession agency. The driver, a man who likely had more integrity in his grease-stained pinky finger than my son had in his entire body, didn't even speak to them. He simply checked the VIN number on Monica's BMW, hooked the chains to the axle, and engaged the winch. Monica screamed. She threw herself at the door handle, clawing at the window as if she could physically hold the car back. She screamed that it was her property, that it was a mistake, that she would sue. The driver didn't even look up. He lifted the car, the suspension groaning in protest, and drove away, taking their last means of escape with him. They were left stranded in the gathering dark, two figures illuminated only by the streetlights they used to think they owned. They had to walk. They dragged their expensive luggage down the street to the bus stop, the wheels clattering loudly in the quiet neighborhood. The neighbors' people they had snubbed for years watched from behind curtained windows. No one came out to help. No one offered a ride. The bridges Bradley had burned were still smoking, and there was no way across. They couldn't go to a hotel in the city. Their cards were dead. Their credit was radioactive. They ended up at the Bluebird Motor Inn, a place on the edge of the highway where the neon sign buzzed with the sound of dying flies, and the rooms were rented by the hour. I know this because Sullivan received a notification from the private investigator who was ensuring they didn't try to break back into the main house. I can picture the room. The carpet would be sticky, smelling of stale smoke and old desperation. The wallpaper would be peeling at the corners. There would be no thread count sheets, no room service, no truffle risotto, just a single flickering fluorescent bulb casting a sickly pallor over their ruin. It was in that room that the darkness truly swallowed them. According to the report, the fighting started almost immediately. It wasn't the bickering of a married couple. It was the vicious, cornered animal snarling of two people who realized they had tethered themselves to a sinking stone. "You did this." Monica's voice would have been shrill, bouncing off the thin walls. "You told me you had it handled. You told me the company was printing money." I married a fraud, and Bradley stripped of his suit jacket, sitting on the edge of a mattress that had seen 1,000 tragedies finally snapped back. "You spent it all, you and your vanity projects, you and your $40 wine, you leached me dry. Monica, you didn't marry me, you married a credit limit." They blamed each other for the darkness, but the truth was, they had both turned out the lights. They sat in the gloom of that motel room. their phones dead or useless, their stomachs empty. There was no electricity in their relationship, no water in the well of their empathy. They were hungry, tired, and terrified. For the first time in his life, Bradley reached into his pocket and found nothing but lint. No keys, no cash, no cards. He looked at his wife and saw a stranger who hated him. She looked at him and saw a failure. The night stretched on endless and suffocating. They tried to sleep, but the sound of trucks roaring past on the highway shook the flimsy walls, a constant reminder of the commerce and movement they were no longer a part of. They were static. They were stuck. And as the cold reality of their new life settled into their bones, the silence between them grew heavy. It was the silence of two people realizing that the only thing worse than being alone is being trapped with the person who helped destroy you. They were discovering that rock bottom wasn't a place you visited. It was a place you lived when you had nowhere else to go. The luxury was gone. The facade was gone. All that was left was the echo of my voice telling them that the bank was closed. It had been 30 days since I walked out of that house in the rain. 30 days of silence. 30 days of watching the sun rise over a turquoise ocean instead of a gray suburban street. I was sitting on the terrace of my villa in St. Kitts, the trade winds cooling the air, a glass of iced tea sweating on the table next to me. I wasn't hiding. I was simply living the life I had earned, a life I had postponed for decades, to play the role of a father to a man who didn't deserve it. My tablet chimed. It wasn't a standard notification. It was the specific urgent tone assigned to the emergency line Sullivan had left open for Bradley. It was the only lifeline I had allowed to remain active, a single thread dangled into the abyss to see if anything would climb up. I looked at the screen. Incoming video call. Unknown number. I knew who it was. I picked up the tablet. I didn't answer immediately. I took a sip of my tea. I adjusted my sunglasses. I wanted to make sure the framing was perfect. Behind me, the infinity pool blended seamlessly with the Caribbean Sea. A waiter in a white uniform was just placing a platter of fresh fruit on the side table. The sun was shining. It was paradise. I tapped the green button. The image that filled my screen was a study in human misery. The camera was shaking, held by hands that were clearly trembling. The lighting was poor, the sickly yellow tint of a cheap motel room lamp. And the face was a ruin. Bradley looked 10 years older than when I had last seen him at the dinner table. His hair, usually styled with expensive product, was greasy and matted against his forehead. He hadn't shaved in days, a patchy beard covering his jaw. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with dark bruised circles that spoke of sleepless nights and terror. He was wearing a t-shirt that looked stained and stretched at the neck. Behind him I could see the peeling wallpaper of the Bluebird Motor Inn. I could see a pile of dirty laundry on the floor. I could see Monica sitting on the edge of the bed, her head in her hands, her once perfect posture slumped in defeat. Dad Bradley's voice cracked. The audio was tinny, distorted by the poor connection on his end, but the desperation was high definition. "Dad, is that you?" "Oh my God." "Oh my God," you answered. I leaned back in my chair, letting the camera capture the full breadth of my relaxation. "Hello, Bradley," I said. My voice was calm, steady, the voice of a man who had slept 8 hours a night for a month. "You look terrible." "Dad, where are you?" Bradley shouted, moving the phone closer to his face so that his nose distorted in the lens. "We went to the house. It was locked. The police, the guards, they threw us out. Dad, everything is gone. The accounts are frozen. My cards don't work. We have nothing. We have absolutely nothing." I took a slice of papaya from the platter. It was sweet and cool. "I know," I said. I froze them. Bradley froze. The realization hit him, but his brain, starved of hope and filled with fear, couldn't quite process the shift in power dynamics. You Why, Dad? This isn't funny. You have to undo it. You have to call the bank. I'm in trouble. Real trouble. I'm aware of your trouble, I said. I'm aware of the $500,000 you owe to the syndicate. I'm aware that Varga is looking for you. Bradley's face drained of color. He looked like a ghost haunting his own life. How do you know that? He whispered. I know everything, Bradley. I always knew. I knew about the embezzlement. I knew about the pension fund. I knew about the mistress in Soho. I knew about your plan to declare me incompetent and sell my house. He started to cry. It wasn't a dignified weeping. It was the ugly, snot-nosed sobbing of a child who has been caught. Dad, please. I didn't mean it. It was the stress. I was going to pay it back. I swear. But you have to help me now. They found us. Varga's guys. They came to the motel yesterday. They gave me 48 hours. They said they're going to break my legs, Dad. They said they're going to hurt Monica. You can't let them hurt us. We're your family. Family. He used the word like a shield, thinking it still had magic properties. Family doesn't try to lock their father in a state facility to die, I said coldly. Family doesn't steal from the people who built the roof over their heads. Dad. I'm begging you. Bradley screamed, falling to his knees. The camera angle shifted wildly, showing the stained carpet. Look at me, I'm on my knees. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything. Just transfer the money. You clearly have it. Look at where you are. You're rich. You were rich the whole time and you let me suffer. I let you suffer. I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I gave you a company. I gave you a home. I gave you a life most men only dream of, and you spit on it. You told me I was wasting your money. Do you remember that, Bradley? You sat across from me eating a $50 steak and told me my heart medication was a waste of resources. I was wrong. I was stupid, Bradley wailed. Monica lifted her head in the background. Her face was gaunt, her makeup long gone. She looked at the screen at the paradise behind me with a mixture of hunger and hatred. Douglas, please, she rasped. We haven't eaten a real meal in 2 days. We are living like animals. Help us, just this once. I looked at them. The contrast was stark. On one side of the screen, a sun-drenched terrace, a man in a linen shirt enjoying the fruits of a lifetime of labor. On the other, a dark, smelly room filled with two people who had never worked an honest day in their lives, drowning in the consequences of their own greed. You asked me to stop wasting money, I said again. I am simply complying with your wishes. Sending money to you would be the ultimate waste. It would be throwing gold into a black hole. Dad. They are going to kill me, Bradley shrieked, pressing his face into the camera lens. Does that mean nothing to you? I looked at the ocean. I watched a sailboat cut through the water, white sails against the blue. It means something, I admitted. It means you made a deal with the devil and now payment is due. And for the first time in your life, you don't have your father's credit card to swipe. Bradley stared at me. The hope was fading from his eyes, replaced by a dawn of absolute terror. He realized that the man on the screen wasn't the father he had bullied. It was a stranger with all the power. Dad, wait. Don't hang up. Please. I'll change. I'll work. I'll pay you back. Just save me. One last time, save me. I looked at him. I saw the fear. It was real. But I also saw the entitlement still lurking beneath it. He didn't want to change. He just wanted the pain to stop. He wanted the checkbook to open. I reached for the button to end the call. I have a meeting, Bradley. I lied. My golf pro is waiting. Dad, no. Dad. His scream was tinny and distant. I tapped the screen. The image of the motel room vanished. The sound of his begging was cut off. Silence returned to the terrace. The wind rustled the palm fronds. The waiter poured more iced tea. I sat there for a moment looking at the black screen of the tablet. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a heavy final closure. I had looked into the face of my son and seen nothing worth saving. He was in hell, and I was in heaven. And the distance between us wasn't just geographical. It was moral. And it was a distance that could never be bridged again. The screen of the tablet remained black for a moment, a digital void where my son's desperate face had just been. But the silence didn't last. The emergency line chimed again. He was calling back. He was tenacious in his panic, if nothing else. I let it ring for 10 seconds. Then 20. I watched a seagull dive into the ocean and come up with a silver fish. Nature was brutal, efficient, and honest. My son was none of those things. I tapped the green button one last time. Bradley's face reappeared. He was closer to the camera now, his eyes wide and frantic. Dad. Thank God. I thought I lost you. I thought the connection dropped. Listen, I know I messed up. I know I was awful. But you can't leave me here. You can't let them hurt me. You said you have the money. Just pay them off. $2 million, that's all. You said it was nothing to you. I looked at him. I saw the calculation behind the fear. He had heard me mention the embezzled amount. He knew the liquidity was there. He was already doing the math, figuring that if he could just survive this, he could manipulate his way back into my good graces. He thought this was a negotiation. $2 million, I repeated slowly. Yes, that is roughly the amount you stole from the company. That is the amount that is currently missing from the pension fund and the operating accounts. I'll pay it back. Bradley swore. I'll work for free. I'll scrub floors. Just clear the debt. Please, Dad. For the family. I sighed. I picked up a document that was lying on the table next to my iced tea. It was a transfer confirmation from the Bank of Zurich. I could pay it, Bradley, I said. You are right. $2 million is a rounding error in my portfolio. It would take me 30 seconds to wire the funds to your account. I could make the bad men go away. I could put you back in a house. I could give you your life back. Bradley's face lit up. Hope is a dangerous thing for a desperate man. Yes. Yes, Dad. Please, just do it. I promise I'll never ask for anything again. I held up the document to the camera. But I can't, I said. Because the money is gone. Bradley squinted at the screen. What? What do you mean gone? I mean spent, I said. I transferred $2.2 million this morning. It left my account at 9 a.m. Transferred where Bradley asked, his voice trembling again. To the loan sharks, to the bank, to the Emily Douglas Scholarship Fund, I said. The name hit him. Emily, his mother. I established it today, I continued. It provides full-ride scholarships for underprivileged students who want to study business ethics and supply chain management. Students who understand the value of hard work. Students who would never steal from their employees. Bradley stared at me. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. $2 million, I said. It will put 50 kids through college. It will change 50 lives. It will create 50 futures. That seemed like a much better investment than saving one man who had already squandered every advantage he was ever given. You gave it away, Bradley whispered. You gave my inheritance to strangers. It wasn't your inheritance, I corrected him sharply. It was my money. And as you so eloquently pointed out at dinner, I needed to stop wasting it. Saving you would be a waste, Bradley. Investing in the future is not. "But I'm your son," he screamed. "I'm your flesh and blood, and they are the future," I said. "You are the past. You had your chance. You had 40 years of chances. You blew them all. Dad, don't do this. You're sentencing me to death, no," I said. "I'm sentencing you to life. Real life. The kind where you have to wake up and earn your keep. The kind where actions have consequences. You're young. You're healthy. You have 2 hands. Go use them. Get a job. Wash dishes. Dig ditches. Do whatever it takes. But do not call me again." I leaned forward, bringing my face close to the camera. "You told me to stop wasting your money, Bradley. I took your advice. I stopped wasting my money on you." I didn't wait for his response. I didn't want to hear the next lie, the next plea, the next curse. I tapped the red button. The screen went black. This time I opened the settings menu. I found the contact for the emergency line. I selected block caller. Then I selected delete contact. It was done. I put the tablet down on the table. The silence of the terrace returned unbroken and pure. I picked up my glass of iced tea. The ice cubes clinked softly. I looked out at the horizon. The sun was dipping lower, turning the ocean into a sheet of hammered gold. It was beautiful. It was peaceful. "Excuse me, sir," I turned. The waiter was standing there, holding a bottle of champagne in a silver bucket. "Mr. Sullivan called," the waiter said. "He said to open this for you. He said the transfer to the scholarship fund was confirmed and the press release has gone out." I smiled. Sullivan was efficient to the end. "Thank you," I said. "Pour it." The cork popped with a festive sound. The waiter poured the golden liquid into a flute. I took it. I held it up to the light. "To 50 futures," I whispered. I took a sip. It was crisp and cold. I put on my sunglasses. I lay back in the lounge chair. I closed my eyes and listened to the sound of the waves crashing on the shore below. My son was in a motel room in New Jersey facing the ruin he had built for himself. I was on a private island drinking vintage champagne. He had wanted me to stop wasting money. I smiled. I had never spent money so well in my entire life. Looking back, I realized my greatest mistake wasn't cutting my son off, but waiting 40 years to do it. Looking back on my own journey, I realized my greatest mistake wasn't trusting my family. It was confusing sacrifice with love. I stayed silent for too long, hoping patience would earn respect. It never does. If you're watching this and living through a similar family story, my advice is simple: don't become invisible in your own life the way I did. Love should never cost you your dignity. God taught me that truth without boundaries turns into permission for abuse. I asked God for the strength to stop enabling behavior that was destroying both me and them. And in the end, I trusted God with the outcome, knowing that justice doesn't always look gentle, but it is always necessary. This family story isn't about revenge, it's about consequences. It's about learning that even in Grandpa stories, age does not mean surrender and kindness does not mean weakness. Too many Grandpa stories end with regret because no one ever draws the line. Let this family story be different. Let these Grandpa stories remind you that self-respect is not selfish. Here's the lesson I leave you with. Protect your integrity, speak the truth early, and never trade your worth for false peace. That is the real legacy. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more meaningful stories. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. And a final note: upcoming stories may include dramatized fictional elements created for educational purposes. If that's not for you, feel free to choose content better suited to your preferences.